on balance, what do you think of these numbers, and how does this impact conviction levels towards Japanese equities?
Sure. Good morning. Happy Friday, and thanks for having me on the show again. Yeah, with regards to inflation first, so our economists, they recently revised up their inflation forecasts. So we're now looking for this year, I think, new core CPI, which would exclude fresh food and energy, hitting 3.9% this year, and then sort of gradually moving down in the following years. In terms of so I think these numbers are pretty much, like you said, I don't think there's much of an impact from these numbers in themselves. In terms of the BOJ later on today, I don't think we're expecting a major change from the BOJ this time around, which I think is pretty consensus. So far, I think, Governor Ueda's messaging around any potential future change of Japanese monetary policy, he's always stressed the importance of being data dependent and confirming the sustainability of both inflation and wage growth. So, to do anything, I think, before we see the annual Shunto wage growth negotiations play out over the next 6 months would be very surprising and quite out of character.
Bruce, 150 is the big number on dollar yen. How problematic could it be for the equities picture if we get there?
Yen's a bit of a double-edged sword, I think, for Japanese equities. If the yen weakens, it's positive overall for Topic's EPS. The sensitivity that we've calculated for about a 10 yen move, it adds or subtracts 3% to EPS. So there's a positive aspect to it. But I guess on the negative side, if we're trying to attract more foreign money into the Japanese markets, and I think that's where, just looking at Kishida-san, the transcript of Kishida-san's speech overnight, I think that's definitely what he's trying to encourage. But, if you're a US dollar denominated investor and you don't hedge your currency exposure, then, it's unless the yen is stable or strengthening, you're actually losing out on the currency side. So, so far this year in dollar terms, Topics is up 13% year to date. It's up 25% in yen terms. So, I think what we need to have to bring more US dollar-denominated investors back into the market is for Topics to start to outperform the S&P on a dollar-denominated basis, and that's what we are actually starting to see that happen over the last few weeks.
And you've got an end-year target for the Topics of 2,500, Bruce, and a 12-month target of 2,650. At a sector level, whether it's the banks, whether it's the beneficiaries of corporate governance reform and investor activism, what then should we own and overweight?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, right? I think there's been two big investment themes in Japan so far this year. One is the Bank of Japan trade, and the other one is the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the TSE trade. So, I think together they have the potential to transform the structure of the Japanese equities market in a way that we haven't seen for at least a decade or so. And I think these opportunities only come along a few times in a career, so you really have to grasp them. And I think global investors are starting to appreciate the significance of what's happening in Japan. But to go back to your question, I think the banks look like one of the most interesting places to be in the Japanese equities market at the moment. Because they sit at that intersection between the BOJ trade and the TSE trade. So there's multiple ways to win on the banks at the moment. So, I think, a major change in monetary policy has the potential to strengthen the yen and maybe drag down the market in the short term. But, as we saw in December, that's going to be positive for the banks. So it's a nice hedge to have against a surprise BOJ move. In addition, the banks are still trading below book value. They've got 3% dividend yields. They've got decent ROE self-help story. They're dealing with cross-shareholdings, and so they're well exposed to the TSE thematic as well. So, our analyst Kuroda-san is positive on the banks, and
right.
She has MUFG as her conviction buy in the sector.
Understood. Thanks for that, Bruce. Next week, we understand that Japan will be outlining an economic package. What are you expecting? Are there any market implications for this, especially on the services sector side and for the consumer?
Yeah, I think the speech that Kishida-san gave at the Economic Club? Economic Club in New York. I think that sort of lays out very clearly what the strategy is there, and what the growth strategy is there for the Kishida administration. So the two pillars of the speech were diplomacy and the economy, and that I think reflects the two new challenges that Japan has had, or Japan has been facing since February last year, and that's sort of a more challenging geopolitical environment and inflation levels that we've not seen since the 1980s. So the economic side of that, I think, will be focused on providing help to Japanese households to deal with the negative impacts of inflation. Part of that is wage growth, but the other part of that is getting more household participation in the Japanese equities market, and to get more foreigners back into the market as well. And to do that, you basically need a market which has better shareholder returns and is more foreigner friendly and has more retail participation. And I think that's what Kishida-san is trying to create at the moment.